Let me tell you about a computer. It's one that could map the entire cosmos, predict the future, and it crashed exactly once. But this wasn't your typical blue screen of death. This crash was into the bottom of the ocean, where it sat, lost, for 2,000 years. This is the story of the Antikythera mechanism.
So think about the computer in your pocket, right? It's sleek, it's powerful, and it'll probably freeze if you try to open a PDF that's too big. Now, compare that to this, a crusty, barnacle-covered lump of bronze that was fished out of a shipwreck. And here's the wild part. They're basically cousins, just separated by a couple of millennia. You see, this device was, without a doubt, the most complex, most sophisticated piece of machinery from the entire ancient world. An absolute marvel of engineering that was then almost immediately dropped into the sea. For decades, nobody even knew what it was, until some very new science started unlocking its very, very old secrets.
Okay, so how in the world did this ancient computer even reappear after 2,000 years? Well, the story of its discovery is almost as incredible as the device itself. And it all starts, like a lot of good stories do, with a powerful storm and a pretty big misunderstanding.
Picture this. It's the year 1900. A crew of Greek sponge divers gets caught in a nasty storm, so they take shelter near the tiny island of Antikythera. While waiting it out, one of them dives down and comes shooting back up, totally terrified, screaming about a gruesome pile of rotting corpses. But the captain, being a bit bolder, goes down to check it out and realizes those aren't bodies. They're priceless bronze and marble statues. They had stumbled upon an ancient Roman treasure ship. So they haul all this incredible stuff back to Athens, and somewhere in the mix is this one corroded, calcified lump of bronze and wood. It gets tossed on a museum shelf and just ignored for 2 years. Until one day, an archaeologist named Valerio Stace spots that the lump has cracked open, revealing something that just should not exist.
And this quote just nails the feeling of that moment. Because inside that rock was a precision-cut gear from a shipwreck dating back to around 60 BC. It was something so technologically out of place, it was completely mind-bending. The discovery basically defied everything historians thought they knew about what ancient people were capable of.
So, what was this impossible machine? Well, it wasn't just a clock. Nope, it was way more ambitious than that. It was a full-blown analog computer designed to model the entire known universe. Crammed inside this thing, which was about the size of a shoebox, were more than 30 interlocking bronze gears. Now think about that. To get this to work, every single tooth on every single gear had to be perfectly calculated and cut by hand. It was a symphony of moving parts, all designed to perfectly mirror the heavens. And it used this incredibly advanced technique called differential gearing. That's a really sophisticated system that lets the machine literally perform math. It could add or subtract the speeds of different rotating gears. To give you some perspective on that, this kind of mechanical engineering wouldn't show up again in Europe for over 1,000 years.
So you turn this one little crank on the side, and this whole clockwork cosmos would just spring to life. On the front, you had dials tracking the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets you can see with the naked eye. It could even predict solar and lunar eclipses decades in advance. And the back had these beautiful, intricate spiral dials that mapped out all the crucial astronomical cycles that they used to keep their calendars in sync.
Oh, and it gets even cooler. It had a tiny little rotating ball, painted half black and half white, that would turn to show you the exact phase of the moon. So yeah, you could kind of say the ancient Greeks were way, way ahead of the curve on inventing dark mode. But for everything we figured out, one huge piece of the puzzle was still missing. A key part of the machine was broken, and it left a critical question totally unanswered for decades. And solving it? Well, that turned into one of the coolest scientific detective stories of our time. See, the calendar ring on the main dial was in pieces, so nobody could just count the days to see how their year was structured. Was it a 365-day solar calendar, like the one the Egyptians used, or was it a 354-day lunar calendar, which was pretty common for the Greeks? Without the whole ring, it seemed like we'd just never know for sure.
And then, just this year, in 2024, researchers found the answer in the most unbelievable place. They used a type of statistical modeling that's normally used to find the super faint signals of gravitational waves. You know, the ripples in space-time caused by colliding black holes, hidden deep within cosmic noise.
And the math actually worked. By analyzing the tiny, almost imperceptible gaps between the surviving holes on those ring fragments, basically treating those imperfections like a signal hidden in noise, the model spit out the answer with overwhelming certainty. The mechanism ran on a 354-day lunar calendar. Just think about that. It took math designed for black holes to solve a 2,000-year-old puzzle. And that same analysis revealed something that might be even more mind-blowing. The variation in the spacing between those little holes on the calendar ring, it was less than 0.03 millimeters. That is an absolutely insane level of precision for someone working with hand tools. These weren't just metalworkers. These people were the absolute masters of precision engineering in the ancient world. So, all of this brings us to what might be the biggest question of all. If the ancient Greeks could build this, it brings up a pretty obvious and, frankly, a very perplexing mystery.
Exactly. Where are all the others? You know, technology like this doesn't just pop into existence out of nowhere. You don't build a masterpiece of this complexity on your very first try. There must have been prototypes, simpler versions, maybe even more advanced successors. So, where are they? Why is the Antikythera mechanism a collection of one?
Now, sometimes you'll hear people compare it to other so-called out-of-place artifacts, like the Baghdad battery. But let's just be really clear here. The Baghdad battery is a simple clay pot that might have been able to generate a tiny little electric charge. The Antikythera mechanism is a differential calculus machine. Comparing them is like comparing a potato clock to a Swiss watch. They're just not in the same league, not even close. The most likely answer is also the most tragic one. Bronze, back then, was an incredibly valuable material. So when these amazing, complex machines eventually broke, or when empires fell and people's priorities changed, they were almost certainly just melted down for scrap metal, turned into swords or shields or coins. And that's really the ultimate irony of this whole story. Its survival is a complete and total accident of history. It was preserved for 2 millennia, not because it was cherished in a museum, but because it was hidden away in a watery grave, safe from a world that would have recycled it without a second thought. It survived only because it was lost. Which leaves us all with one final, pretty tantalizing thought. You know, that shipwreck has only been partially excavated, so what other secrets, what other impossible technologies might still be buried down there in the mud at the bottom of the sea, just waiting for us to find them? What else has history forgotten?